Today's project is in honor of the first stirrings of spring here in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to be making a Pysanky egg. Hi, welcome to Ragged Crow Art. I'm Kate. Pysanky eggs are a traditional Ukrainian dyed egg. Pro tip: for best results, don't set your egg where you can knock it off the table. There are going to be several tools that we're using today. First, Pysanky writing is done with beeswax. I like to use a black beeswax so that it stands out a little bit more and I can see what I'm doing. The wax is applied using a tool called a kiska. It's like a little wax holder funnel that'll drop the wax onto the egg. I use a pencil first to draw a design onto the egg. Don't worry if you mess up while drawing in pencil, just keep going. Make a slightly darker line that you can follow later on and do not erase. Erasing can leave a film that will actually keep the dye from contacting that area of the egg later, whereas all the pencil lead is just going to wipe away as the beeswax is removed at the end of the process. I use a tea candle to heat up the kiska and melt the wax. I have several different kiska options. The size of the tip is different, as well as the stem on the kiska and the orientation of the tip. For those familiar with drawing pins, these come in similar sizes, and I'm using a 0.3 millimeter and a 0.5 millimeter kiska in this video. There are also electric kiskas, and I've heard that they help get a really even melt on the wax, so a more even application of the wax. I've not yet tried one myself, but I got inspired as I was making this video and I have one on the way. So I'll plan to make a future video with it and maybe we can check out the difference together. You will need an egg. Today I'm working on a white chicken's egg, but I've seen all different kinds of eggs used in all different sizes and all different colors, and they take up the dye slightly differently when they have a different color, like a brown egg, but they all turn out to be really beautiful. So use what you have, but just be sure to take them out of the fridge and let them warm up to room temperature first. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with condensation as you try to write on them. You also have the option to blow the yolk and the white out of the egg later on, and you can choose to go either way with this. I've never experienced an issue by simply letting them dry out over time, so I've mostly stopped blowing out any of the eggs that I make unless I'm going to do something like string them onto a hanging ornament. I have gotten carried away in blowing out the egg before, and then I've ended up using too much pressure and cracking my egg, which is really heartbreaking after all that work. But either way, don't blow out the egg before doing your writing and your dyeing, otherwise you're going to have one heck of a time getting the egg to sink down into the dye. Now, I have a plate that I've set aside specifically for this work, but the beeswax and dye seem to come off pretty easily from any kind of glass or commercially glazed dish that you're going to use by a simple run through the dishwasher. I just wouldn't recommend leaving them in contact with the dye for a very long time, but personally I haven't run into any trouble. Also, be smarter than me. Start with a clean plate free from wax. I think that my egg rubbed a little bit onto the wax that was left over on the plate, and that maybe I didn't dye quite as evenly as a result. And on that note, I have tried a couple of different types of dye. I've used some batik dye, some food coloring, and then I found the Ukrainian gift shop's dye packets. These have actually given me the best results, and their store is quick to ship in my experience, and they're based out of Minneapolis, which felt meaningful as we talk about this art form as a form of resistance. I'm not sponsored, but I did enjoy their shop, and I've linked it in my comments. Pysanky is a traditional Ukrainian art form that's been practiced for at least hundreds of years. The oldest known pysanka looks to be a duck egg from the 16th century that was found in 2013 in western Ukraine. Because they're a natural medium and they're fragile by nature, I think there were probably a lot of older eggs that were out there that just simply didn't survive over time. But there have been ceramic versions that have been found that date to the 12th century. In 2024, the art form was added to the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. My understanding is that making this art at various times has needed to go underground throughout history because of various political regimes, and so it is an art form that's come to have some significance as an act of cultural resistance. So it feels like an all-around good time to engage in this kind of art as resistance work. I've linked the UNESCO site and a Time magazine article about Pysanky in the comments in case you want to do some additional reading. Now, I had made up the dyes that I used in this video previously. Some need vinegar, some don't. So read each dye packet very carefully and mix the dye powder according to the instructions for each one. After making this egg, which is the first one that I had made in a little while, I think it's probably time to make some new batches of dye since I had had a little bit of difficulty with the dye uptake on this particular egg. Again, it could have just been from rubbing against some of the beeswax on the plate, but you know, if you're going to spend the time on this, you want to have a good dye result at the end of it. Keep in mind as you are applying beeswax that for each wax application, you're effectively writing in the color of the last dye that was applied. So whenever I started out, there was no dye, so everything that I wrote prior to the bath in the raspberry color would end up staying white at the end. And after I applied the raspberry colored dye and before this blue bath, everything that I was going to write then would have stayed raspberry colored. And so this makes your mind think a little bit in terms of negative spaces or working backwards almost on a project, which is similar to doing something like batik or printmaking. So go slowly, take your time with us, and if you feel yourself losing interest, simply pop the egg back into a carton and take a break. This can be some detailed work, and while I found it really easily to get into a nice flow whenever I'm making the Pysanky, on some more intricate designs or ones with a lot of colors, I have had to take a break in the middle. So for this egg, it took me about 6 hours, and it's only 3 colors, and it's not the most detailed or intricate work that I've done. So you can see where you'd need to take a few stretch breaks in there. Just keep building up the wax in your design, and remember to work from the lightest colored dye to the darkest. So if you try to put yellow dye over black dye, you're not going to see it, and once wax is over a particular spot, it's just on there. There's really no good way to remove it without leaving a residue behind. And so, like a lot of types of art, there feels like there's kind of a messy middle with making Pysanky where you'll go, oh gosh, it's ugly, or I messed it up, it's just not turning out the way that I want it to. You probably didn't mess it up, and go ahead and see it through, and I bet you'll be more pleased with the end result than you think that you will be. Removing the wax takes off any of those pencil lines that you see during the process, and then rubbing the eggs with the wax during the heating process and removal gives it almost a varnish type appearance, so it gets really nice and shiny and looks quite nicely finished when you're done. Plus, for an art form that's existed for at least hundreds and probably thousands of years, give yourself a little grace if you're just starting out with it. There's plenty of time to perfect your art. If you'd like to see some other Pysanky designs or purchase any of the eggs or other art or gifts, head on over to our Etsy shop at Ragged Crow Art. I've also linked that below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for some more art content. I'm always going to be trying out something new, and so if there's something that you'd like to see next time, feel free to drop it in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.